Donald Trump. The most craven ego to walk, thinks he wants to be the last American dictator. We have just 6 days left until Election Day. That day you've been stressed about for 4 years. And you know that Donald Trump is a very dangerous man. We know Donald Trump fawns for dictators, but what is more important is their interest in his vulnerabilities and how that can be used to exploit him as a weakness to American security. We know Russia aggressively interfered in the 2016 presidential elections. We know his campaign associates and proxies actively sought dirt on his opponent. And we do not forget how he directly called on Russia to hack his political target of choice.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press.
Then he brings the Russians into the Oval Office and brags how he fired the FBI director, insulted and discredited our intelligence agencies, and absolved the attacker, Vladimir Putin, in Helsinki. We know he stirred up his extremists and launched them right at our democracy.
We're going to walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. I love Pennsylvania Avenue. And we're going to the Capitol, and we're going to try and give. The Democrats are hopeless. They're never voting for anything. Not even one vote. But we're going to try and give our Republicans, the weak ones, because the strong ones don't need any of our help. We're going to try and give them the kind of pride, boldness that they need to take back our country.
Tomorrow, we shift to the other investigations into Donald John Trump with an expert on investigations, busting criminal organizations, and of course, uncovering the espionage efforts of our adversaries. Extremists, disinformation, money laundering are all the tools used to destroy our democracy. We will discuss. Don't miss our Special Spaces event with former FBI Assistant Director for Counterintelligence, Frank Figliuzzi, right here on NatSecMedia. NatSecMedia is a non-commercial news and information resource supported by listeners and viewers like you. Subscribe to our channels today, and we thank you for subscribing to our Patreon as a means of supporting independent journalism. Thank you.
We have just a few more days until Donald Trump is essentially put on probably the most important trial besides the one that will send him to prison. It's a chance to defeat him for the second time and send him packing, because you know he doesn't have the backbone to keep coming, right? It's not in his style to do so. And I'm not really surprised he decided to take his second round at this, because it's his only attempt to do a get out of jail, get his chance to pardon his friends. And there's a lot of crimes on the table. There's a lot of threats on the table. 4 years ago, there was a beginning of merging in units of violence that came from different sectors of our society in America, especially as the George Floyd rallies were beginning to take place. And we had COVID that was being used as one of the excuses for these kind of grab your guns, lockdown movements, right? And guys like Mike Dunn, who were in the Boogaloo Boys, decided to go over and talk to the Black Lives Matters crowd. and say, let's work together. We have something in common. You know that they don't ultimately. Um, but there were other areas of Telegram and Parler eventually where people who really wanted to act out a very long history of anti government, anti minority, anti LGBT, anti woman, you name it. They were looking for a chance to act it out. They just needed the pack effect, right? They needed to have a chance to be effectuated so that there was potentiality in their, if that's a good word, so there was potential in their movement that was years ago. A lot of these movements were irrelevant, right? They had lost their flavor over the generations, but there was a guy who brought them back, the orange guy. And the orange guy um, gave him permission to go back to something we had moved past in many ways, where we had made it untoward to be the Archie Bunker at the table. But, and then came Orange Guy. And remember how the GOP said that, there's all of the institutional GOP. There's no way he'll be our nominee. And then they dropped to their knees and they kissed the ring. Ted Cruz, Mitch McConnell, his biggest apologists and advocates after a while, right? And there was one thing to do it in, 2016. It's another to do it in 2020. I can't understand how any of these people can full face do it 2024, knowing he's a 34-time convicted felon, a rapist. That needs to be emphasized. And fawns over dictators, fawns over their power, admires their strongman pursuits. He sees nothing wrong with applauding Viktor Orban. Sees nothing wrong with shaming our intelligence agencies. Sees nothing wrong with humiliating our law enforcement. Sees nothing wrong in humiliating our military leadership. So the question upon our country is what are we? What do we stand for? And I don't see these things as a person who worked in counterterrorism research and sometimes taking the servers out and stuff like that. I don't see it as a left-right issue when it comes to security because they don't care. They don't designate that. Very rarely. I mean, the Iranians are looking for Trump. But living in Ukraine as an American from Texas, here we understand an existential threat. The threat's on the outside. The threat is not on the inside as much, In the past, it was Yanukovych, division, corruption. But the country finds its unified external threat and finds the flag to stand together constantly as a unified nation to move forward to defend itself. America's lost that since 9/11. We turned on each other. So I actually have one account here I bring in on purpose, which is Cheney Watch account down there. Because years ago, as just a regular little radio journalist, I thought accountability had to mean something. It had to. or what we had was a lie. It had to mean something. Or all those myths that we pour around the world were lies, right? The things we tell them to get the blue thumb over, right? They're lies if we can't do it for ourselves. Part of this is a matter of reminding us that we've had a chance to get this right in the past and that we have an obligation to get this right in the future. We already let Dick Cheney and crew get away with war crimes. Okay, obviously that's not going to be challenged. What's on top of us now is far more important because, at the very least, although he challenged much of that system and challenged much of the social order and have a lot of reasons to criticize that era, Donald Trump wants to completely destroy that order. He wants to humiliate Europe. And he wants to do the very thing that Putin is wanting him to do. And he's running on his own sails. You know? Which is what makes him an ideal asset. Is he's got all of these wonderful components to just make him the easiest atomic pinball to run around in the American machine and just destroy it over and over. I mean, our election system last time, they're still doing it right now. They're still saying Pennsylvania in less than 48 hours. Hey, welcome. First off, I want to welcome you to your first space. Well, a lot of these folks are real big fans, and I'll tell you what, it's Halloween. I'm going to switch disguises. I'm now in spy mode. Let's see here. Okay, I switched. Now I've got my spy dog on.
I was Batman this evening with my grandkids already.
Oh, I love that, actually. So we've got a few days left until this election, and it just watching those video clips I ran all day from 2016 was surreal because it's like it feels like yesterday. And then I want to go to a conversation you were having with Fernando Mondi in August 2022, where you switched to election threats. And then we had a conversation. And then in slow motion, everything that got discussed happened. Now we're 4 years later, Stuart Rhodes is in prison. Enrique Tarrio's in prison.
Yeah.
But the threat didn't go away. The Maine Orange guy is still going. What's on your mind for the biggest stuff we need to look for in the next few days?
Well, I think especially for this audience, since we are on social media, we are about to be inundated. And if you thought we were already inundated, just stand by with social media disinformation, misinformation, propaganda. And that's nothing compared to the possibility that it will be aimed, that the efforts will be aimed at convincing people not to vote, or convincing people that their candidate or the opposing candidate has just done something horrifically awful. And by the time it gets straightened out and called out as fake, 1 million, 10 million people would have already seen it, and the damage might already be done. So that in the immediate, threat that's facing us, I can see the ramping up of the disinformation and misinformation already happening, and it will happen at a speed with which the government won't get out the truth fast enough. I mean, I have to applaud the effort thus far, which would be, for example, this business of people destroying ballots, and a video allegedly of ballots being destroyed in Pennsylvania, a video wherein a young person made some horrific allegation of abuse against Tim Walz from his days back when he was a teacher. U.S. government came out and said false, false. In fact, they quickly attributed it to Russia. So that's good. The question is, can they really keep up with it? I think not. And so that's a concern of mine. But gosh, Chris, I mean, I put the threats into three categories: uh, international, and the international threats include what I just said: misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda. But let's not forget that we're still under threat of an attack from on the West in terms of violent jihad. And we've been
True.
warned repeatedly. I think we've been warned to the point where we're numb to the warnings. Chris Wray, DHS, all repeatedly issuing the bulletins saying, hey, it's coming. We're telling you it's coming. And it's, if you look at what's developed with Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas and Israel, how could terror groups of any stripe not try to do something? And many of your listeners are savvy enough to go, well, Frank, they already have done something. They've tried something. We know from public reporting that the FBI has stopped at least two attempts to mess with our election, do an attack prior to the election involving ISIS-K. And who knows how many we don't yet know have been mitigated yet. But I would be surprised if they don't keep trying, particularly on election day, just to say, hey, don't forget about us. We're here. And it only takes one. It only takes one. And people may say, well, are you talking about that recent takedown where there was this guy and some juvenile? Well, let me tell you, yes, I am talking about that. And if you think it's just some guy and some kid, think again, because the FBI and my sources are all saying this was directed by ISIS-K. So this is not just some guy, trying to pull something off with some kid. They were under ISIS-K
Right.
direction, as far as I know. So there's your international threat, and
Right.
of course, Russia and North Korea. I don't need to tell you, Chris, based on where you are, that the news today of 8 to 10,000 North Korean troops poised to do battle, apparently for their buddy Putin. The world is a tinderbox right now, and yeah, I do think we'll see something in the cyber world. Let's go to the next bucket of threats that I put things in, which is domestic. No surprise to anyone. We've got a domestic terror problem here. And while I absolutely believe that 1,000 or more convictions, what last time we talked, Chris, we were probably saying, well, it's 1,000 arrests. No, now we've got over 1,000 convictions
Oh, I
for
know.
for
I know.
January 6th.
Remember, I was in the hotel printing them all out, and the real nice ladies at Hilton
Yeah,
like, here's some more. I'm like, yeah, it's getting really tall. That was actually, I saw the video clip from that. I was at 150 filings at that point, where all that was out at that stack.
yeah.
150 filings.
And there's good news there in that it does appear to have had a chilling effect. In the extremist chat rooms, and many of your listeners are knowledgeable of this, but you hear things like, "Hey, I'm not getting arrested," or "I'm not going to Washington. That's a trap." That's a setup. Okay, good. Yeah, sure. And it's not, but okay, don't come. And I think the soft targets are going to be the vulnerable targets. I think if we see something play out, and it could be a lone actor or a small cell, it's going to be at the county, local, state level. And what concerns me is whether or not those law enforcement agencies at that level are really prepared for this. And the good news is DHS, FBI have been joined at the hip the past several months in preparing local, state, and county officials for what might come. And it's all hands on deck. The intelligence is being shared. Travel is being, monitored of known violent extremists who appear poised to act out violently. Um, Everybody seems to have learned their lesson from January 6th and missing the clear intelligence that was there. But I also want to point out something that I don't think is getting enough traction and attention on the domestic scene, which is this issue of constitutional sheriffs. And, we've got dozens now of full-blown active duty elected constitutional sheriffs. And for those who aren't familiar with it, these sheriffs absolutely believe that they are the sole person in their county. And by the way, this means the state as well, because they won't listen to any state elected officials, or for that matter, judges. They get to decide the law. They alone get to decide what's constitutional in their county. So what we've been monitoring for a long time is the easy stuff, which is they've already said, hey, we don't enforce red flag laws in our county. We'll never take a gun away from a citizen, even if our state allows us to temporarily to resolve a threat allegation. So they don't obey the law. Some constitutional sheriffs have been indicted. Maryland and Virginia have sheriffs that have been indicted for gun scenarios like that. And so if you look, Chris, at the key swing states and say, okay, where are these constitutional sheriffs where it really matters? And Frank, what damage can they really do? One
There's
guy.
this one place called Arizona.
Yeah.
What do you know about Arizona?
Arizona, Michigan, and Wisconsin have some constitutional sheriffs. And what's the damage they can do? These guys actually believe, by the way, they have conferences and conventions, Las Vegas, Florida. They go to nice places like we all do for conventions. And they talk about what they're going to do. And all one guy has to do in one key county is say, I think I see some fraud. I'm empowered to investigate it. I'm seizing the ballots, or I'm stopping the vote here at the county offices, stopping the count of the vote. Big problem. Big problem. And why? What would be behind that? Delay. Give Trump a running start to fill a gap of time. We already know we're highly unlikely to know who won Tuesday night. I would say, we're going to have issues perhaps for days after Election Day, mostly caused by Trump refusing to acknowledge the outcome of the election if he loses. And if that happens, and one or two constitutional sheriffs have stopped the presses, we stopped the vote. We got a problem, fraud, stop the counting. The gap, as they say, idle time is the devil's workshop. Well, rest assured, if you give bad actors enough of a window of time, they'll fill that gap.
And they're on the lead already. They're on the head start. And Robert Reich was pointing out something in a small clip that passed me YouTube or on here somewhere, where he said, "Here's the thing you have to remember: there's this red wave at the beginning, but it will settle this way, and that's because rural districts are counted faster." And then, of course, the cities pour in, and this is what they do. And I thought, what an easy way numerically to show what disinformation looks like. Essentially, that's where it's at.
Yeah, I mean, Trump did that last time around, right? Hey, what happened? I was way ahead. And then all of a sudden there was a, quote, dump of votes. Well, yeah, it's called, some states do absentee ballots last. They do overseas ballots last. Yeah, there's going to be some surge at the end of the night or overnight. Yes, prepare for that. Prepare for Trump to declare victory, early. And he's already this week started with the fraud today, claiming, we've got, quote, massive fraud in Pennsylvania. Is there something going on investigatively in Pennsylvania? Yes, there is. Yeah, there is apparently, with a small number of ballots. It looks like the same person or persons signed multiple ballots. That's a problem. But let me tell you, don't jump to conclusions on who may have been behind that, because even in multiple counties where I believe we're talking about Lancaster County and York County, Pennsylvania. Well, there's a third party that apparently is tied to dropping all these in the mail or in a box. And it's the same unnamed third party in both counties. And, I'm a cynic. Would I put it past the MAGA folks for ginning up some kind of fraud themselves and trying to blame it on the left? No, I wouldn't put it past them at all. But something's amiss. Whether it's pre-planned or not, I don't know. But yeah, he's already grabbed it, and you're going to be hearing that for months to come.
I have a huge question that actually came up, and I'm sorry, actually, I feel late in even asking this. Frank, you did this thing called counterintelligence. Elon. We'll stay in Pennsylvania first, because when you said it, I was like, oh yeah, there's this guy that put down a bunch of money that if you register, there's and actually the DOJ just indicted some Americans for playing around with Russian money in Florida, doing something like that. Oops. I mean, they did a little different. They were trying to buy a small election, but you can't play around with money in elections and not get in the big trouble machine. Yes.
Yeah, I often don't jump to legal conclusions early, but I will tell you, I believe what Elon has been doing is a violation of federal law. And while I'm dismayed by the delay that developed today. I don't know if you heard, but the state court judge in Pennsylvania moved this case, agreed to stop the case because Elon's lawyers have motioned to move it to federal court. And yeah, that sounds right to me. What we're talking about is a violation of federal law. So yes, it'll go, but believe me, highly unlikely we're going to get a serious resolution by election day. I suppose a federal judge could quickly step in Pennsylvania and say, hey, cease and desist till we figure this out. But yes, it's a violation of federal law to pay people even to register to vote, not just to vote, but to register to vote. So, yeah, I think, and DOJ's already sent Elon Musk a warning letter. By the way, that's a courtesy that I'm not a fan of. You and me, Chris, we wouldn't get warning letters. We would just eventually get a target letter.
Exactly.
Hey, we're fixing to arrest you, right?
Billionaire courtesies.
Yeah, we're giving you a heads up that we think maybe kind of what you're doing might maybe violate the law. Come on, I haven't seen many warning letters in my 25-year FBI career, but he got one, and I will say
Wow.
he seems to have stopped. He gave out $2 million. Well, no, I think he gave out $12 million awards, but he seems to have stopped. So something put the fear of God into him, probably his lawyers.
But these phone calls to Putin, for instance, where he's doing this other type of behavior where he just decides Starlink can be turned off for the Ukrainians because, well, I don't know. I mean, I thought that might hit Sevastopol. That might create a problem. I mean, I don't know what he really thought at that moment. He clearly made a decision.
Yeah.
But then it comes out that he's having these phone calls, and it's like we have our satellite systems and our communication systems are really tied into this private enterprise. And I thought we had this covered when we were arguing about Halliburton and Blackwater and turning over the ability to control these various serious situations. So what does that do for the spy chasers, so to speak? That area that has to watch those types of vulnerabilities.
I am sure that in the counterintelligence division of FBI headquarters, there are some people who are pulling their hair out. So look, I try to really think outside the box, and I don't try to be this strict kind of old timer who can't look at history and look at what's going on in today's world with the developing tech billionaires, who I think eventually are going to become our form of oligarchs. But he's got a clearance. Musk, I don't know how many people know this, but Musk has a U.S.
That was the question. Does he get a clearance?
Yeah, he's got a U.S. clearance. He's got one because we're so horribly dependent upon him in the tech world and in aerospace. I mean, this is somebody who be launching rockets, satellites, satellites in orbit for the U.S. DoD. Where does this go? And Is anybody really controlling his access? And so you and me, if we're U.S. government employees, and as we know, I have been for 25 years, I had been, I had to report every god darned vacation I took to the Caribbean. If I got on a cruise ship, it had to be reported. The cruise stopped in the Bahamas.
Look, Frank, you know the easiest way to get Yahoo is get on the Supreme Court.
Well, yeah. I should call Clarence and say, look, if you're not using your buddy's yacht, but so I literally,
you're such a Boy Scout.
I kid you not, though. There was, I'll give you an example of how this affects real people, and then Elon Musk. So there was a cruise I went on because I used to be in FBI Miami for a few years, and so we would get discounted Florida resident last minute cruises. It basically paid you to take a cruise, and so we'd get on with the family. There was a time when I don't know, it was Bahamas or Cayman or something. We didn't even get off the ship. And I said to my security officer that I had to report all foreign travel to, hey, do I have to report? We didn't even get off. Yeah, you got to report that. Okay. So Elon Musk has a clearance and he's on the phone with Putin. Do you think that Mr. Musk is filling out the FD whatever form? And
No.
Yeah. No. You're supposed to report foreign contacts. It could be your cousin in Argentina. But, Putin, yeah. So, look, I'm calling for Musk's security clearance to be reviewed. But I'm a big boy. I understand this is the big time, right? And throughout our history, there have been powerful people who pushed society forward and embedded themselves. It's a lot easier today to embed yourself with bad people around the world. But think about the Carnegies, the Rockefellers, the
Right.
Kennedys. The Vanderbilts. They helped build railways, and they built our infrastructure. And Washington kind of looked the other way.
Steve Jobs.
Yeah. Well, right. So just keep going, and here we are. And now we find out, well, actually, Donald Trump has had several conversations with Putin, allegedly. And what do we do about that? If he gets to become the president and the transition starts, which, by the way, I know I'm doing what Donald Trump calls the weave. I'm changing topics, but I will get back.
It's at your own pace, bro.
Yeah. So let's talk about Donald Trump having allegedly several conversations with Putin as an ex-president. If he gets elected, the transition could start, and I say could start because not many people know his so-called transition team, which is, by the way, headed by Linda McMahon of World Wrestling fame. She runs
sounds about right.
The WW. Yeah, right. Of course, a circus. She's a circus leader, and why not lead the transition? They literally haven't even filled out the proper forms to start the transition. You typically you need office space. You need to hire a team. You have personnel and HR issues. You have rental issues. You start getting briefings. Nope. They haven't filled out all the forms. Yeah, I don't know if they intend to transition. Who knows?
Laura Loomer will be the press secretary.
Yeah, she's kind of PNG'd now from the tribe there.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but what's my point? He could start demanding his classified briefings on Wednesday. If
someone mentioned earlier when I brought it up earlier in the pre-space was that he said at this time he's passing them because he doesn't want to be accused of anything. Like, I don't want him right now. Besides that, he knows more than the general, so he wouldn't have to have them. But
yeah.
But that's at least good to know, at least at this moment. But your point is more important, is that he could say, you know what, on second thought, and the system isn't really geared to tell him not to, which is such a strange oversight on our amazing. We have a really amazing country, by the way, I think, frankly.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of things that uphold despite how hard it's been stressed.
Especially
recently.
I totally this is one huge stress test, as they say in the banking industry, when they start testing big banks, right? To see, they throw various variables at them and see if they can survive on a kind of tabletop exercise. This is a stress test for us. With regard to this whole issue of clearances and ne'er-do-wells like Donald Trump having, classified access, which, by the way, people come up to me still in the grocery store and say, I don't understand how how would Trump get a clearance? So no, Trump doesn't get a clearance. That doesn't happen. That's automatic. Our elected officials don't get any background investigation. A Congress member, they just get it. If they need access, they get it. And I wrote a column yesterday for MSNBC. It's out. And it's following up on this reporting, New York Times reporting from multiple sources, that Trump advisors are telling Trump, don't even bother with these silly old FBI background investigations for the people you're going to appoint in your new administration. Don't bother. And of course, we know why that is. Anybody that's close enough for Trump to trust has probably got a criminal record, and certainly foreign entanglements. You may remember in the prior Trump administration where his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, wanted top secret compartmented.
Oh, yes.
He wanted SCI clearance.
Yeah.
And finally, and so the rank and file career security specialists at the White House who've been doing this for decades, they're the ones who look at the FBI background and they go yay or nay, right? And they said nay to Jared Kushner after looking at the mess of his life and his foreign allegiances and his finances,
and his dad's complete failure as like a financial felon.
Well, yeah, and that, by the way, that counts. Family is supposed to count. Again, if you or I are applying for a federal job, yeah, that's supposed to count. But anyway, so the careerists go, yeah, no, by our standards, no, he can't see classified. So here comes this suddenly arriving supervisor for these decisions in the White House, and he issues 30 overrides of the career staff, an unprecedented number that's never happened before. But God bless the Central Intelligence Agency, because they put their foot down hard and said, okay, look, I understand the president's told you to give this young man a top secret, but no way in hell is he getting SCI, which is a compartments within top secret. And that, as far as I know, that prevailed. But let's think about where this goes. And this is really what my column talks about, is these advisors are now telling Trump, hey, don't bother with these background investigations. Just don't bother. Just either, there's two options for you. Get some private investigative firm to do some, ramshackle investigation, which, by the way, is ridiculous. Of course, they have no access to classified, to intercept, to DOJ to see if somebody's currently under investigation. They got nothing. What are they going to pull? Traffic records off the internet. Or Mr. Trump, just go ahead and give the clearance, right? That would allow people like Steve Bannon and whoever the hell else to serve, to serve roles, even be cabinet members, for God's sake. So it's a mess. It's a total mess.
I can't imagine, again, like I said, the people who have to do this job. I was discussing this with Britt the other day about law enforcement. And I said, well, you have to sit where I'm sitting. I mean, I'm a civilian doing counterterrorism work, but when we try to get information to officials or, agents who do some sort of work, or even local law enforcement, you can't just bombard them with data. You have to give them something that's actionable. You don't want to waste your time. But even if we put that kind of standard on it, bringing in, it's just, there's so much. It's an amazing amount of threats, like just the type of email stuff that comes in, the threats over phone calls, the threats detected on the internet, and it's growing, and there's less officers to do it and less to investigate. And now there's a guy coming into office that wants to destroy the ability to do it. So I can imagine someone that wants to actually take on the job,
Yeah. Now let's not forget. Let's throw into that mix. It's Halloween, so why not tell horror stories? We've got a Supreme Court that has already said, yeah, not only are you immune, do you enjoy absolute immunity for official acts, but we don't want law enforcement investigating to your conversations, your exchange of communications with DOJ, the Attorney General, lawyers at the Pentagon, lawyers at DHS. That's off limits to investigate. So, if you want to try and find a bright spot in that Supreme Court decision, which is asinine, you'd say, oh, well, okay, it's for official acts, that he enjoys absolute immunity. I can live with that. Yeah, sure. Well, the Supreme Court went a step further and said, yeah, well, we don't want the FBI trying to figure out whether it's official or not. So we don't want you pulling any discussions or communications between Trump and decision makers about whether it's legal or not, whatever he's doing. So essentially, he really can do whatever he wants.
Pretty much. Hey, I know these wonderful friends of ours are waiting to ask questions, so I feel selfish if I just keep it to myself. If you don't mind, I'll let these good folks join in here.
Sure.
Integral is one of our listeners who kind of goes between listening to not just the Ukraine stuff, but definitely pays attention to what's happening in America. But he's in Thailand, I believe, right? Right, Integral?
That's correct, Chris.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. And Frank, I really appreciate what you've done. I've followed some of your work. Look, the question that kind of sticks in the back of my mind for the last few years is, will the public ever become aware, even in general terms, of the damage assessment that must have been conducted after the discovery of all those missing documents? Will we ever learn about really how much damage that created?
So that's a great question. And I wish I had better news for you, but I'm not sure that I'll be alive by the time the government declassifies that damage assessment. So first thing, yes, there's been a damage assessment done, of course. And you may recall that, there was a decision to stop the investigation of the documents, but the damage assessment, and for a brief time, the FBI stopped even the damage assessment, but then started it back up pretty quickly. Under the whole damage assessment involved the entire U.S. intel community, but under the direction of the DNI, and rightly so, because there were documents from across the intel community. So yes, there's a damage assessment that exists. When do we get to see that, if ever? And in the declassification process, and I was, as assistant director, the head of counter intel at FBI. There were times when I absolutely was a declassifying authority, and there aren't many classifying and declassifying authorities in the FBI, but I was one, and I would have to make decisions on declassifying. And you've got to look at factors like, okay, if this gets out in the wild, is the damage assessment going to do more damage by getting out in the wild? Are we looking at damage to human sources and technical sources? Do those things still matter? Because it could be years from now. My point is, when you start considering all the factors that would allow you to declassify something, in a situation like this, particularly that allegedly contains some Department of Energy or U.S. DoD nuclear information, allegedly, we may never see it. We may never see it. The best we could hope for is to see parts of it within a heavily redacted larger document.
And a brief follow-up on that. So in the event that case is refiled by Frank Smith, and I suspect it will be, is it possible that during the trial there may be components of the trial that will discuss that damage in some sort of confidential way? Is that ever possible?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So there's a whole process in the U.S. government that's used for espionage cases, or we'd never be able to try espionage cases in court. So yes, you can do this in the judge's chambers, in camera. You can clear the courtroom, and the defense team gets the clearances themselves, which is another a process that always fascinated me, that we have to give clearances to the criminal defense attorneys who are representing the criminal that we're accusing, and we're going to tell them, please, only share what you need to with your client or not, or you can only look at it here, but don't take any copies or notes. Put your phone away before you walk in the room to view this stuff. But short answer, yes. There's a process where they'll need to show a jury or the judge that, look, we are talking about highly sensitive, damaging material, and we can back that up by showing you the damage that was done.
Got it. And one last follow up, and then I'll drop down. In the lay press, there's the story of what happened in the Oval Office not too long after Trump was elected, where he had Lavrov and Kisilak in there.
Yeah.
And there was supposedly an exchange of top secret information that compromised assets for Israel
You
and
dropped.
Syria.
Or I dropped. One of us dropped.
Oh, can anybody hear me?
Can you hear me?
I can hear Frank. Integral.
Integral.
Let me recycle you real quick.
Okay, I'll come back.
Frank, Frank, can you hear me? I think Frank's recycled. Hold on, let me message him. 1 second. I think he lost his thing. Hold on.
Am I back?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can. We dropped.
Good.
I dropped, or you dropped.
So
or something.
real quick for the future, because I think you should do spaces. I said this about it because you do great on podcasts with Dean and others. So it's a voice over IP. So what it's doing is it's connecting in voices like a group. Remember back in the day you could do like group calls,
Yeah, sure.
So that's what it's doing. So listeners are on one channel, and then when we're in speaker mode, we basically are all on that. And then like if you go between Wi-Fi's, like I have 2 Wi-Fi's in this apartment, if I cross that Wi-Fi, it sometimes basically quote unquote disconnects the call. Which is why you guys get. Yeah, we figured out what Elmo doesn't know how to fix.
That may be. Well, yeah.
Okay, so back to
more.
Integral, so we get that part, and then we'll go on to Sparky.
Got it.
To Sparkles.
So my last question was, in reference to that event that occurred in the Oval Office shortly after Trump was elected, when he had Lavrov and Kisilak and a few other assorted people in the Oval Office, and the lay press reported that top secret information was divulged that possibly compromised our ally Israel with assets in Syria. Is there any more that can be said about that, or did they get the story essentially right?
The story is essentially correct. There's been enough confirmed reports in the media with multiple sourcing that I'm confident saying that it was Israeli intel that he gave up, that the Israelis were livid about it, and that Russia itself was shocked at him releasing that to them. You've got the general topic right. And I can tell you the even greater concern writ large is that our allies were like, what the hell? Are we supposed to continue giving you intelligence? And literally allies asking member agencies, are you giving this to the White House? Because if you are, no, we're not giving it to you. So you can see the impact around the world. And I know that MAGA doesn't care. It's America first, right? Which has really become America only, which is really short-sighted. But
which is really freaking Nazi, by the way.
Well, yeah. Well, yes. The origins of that. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's a big mess. But yes, you've got the story generally correct.
Thank you. Perky, otherwise known as Sparkles, who's one of our great leaders in this community of what we do.
Aw,
I have to do that
so
too. I love to
excited.
put you on the spice.
I'm so excited to talk to Batman.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I'm in the Batcave right now.
This is like a dream come true because I'm usually just like in awe of what you're saying on MSNBC. But I kind of, to piggyback on the classified information. So I guess my question would be like, what steps does the FBI take to investigate and or recover missing classified information? Because I know, wasn't there like a missing Russian binder that Trump had? And
Yeah.
what, I guess, what are the challenges do the agents face in such cases? And now, how do we recover that if we do recover that? Like, I'm just sitting here thinking like Elon's having conversations with Putin, Trump's having conversations with Putin. There's missing classified information. I would imagine like the intelligence community may be intercepting some of these communications. And I'm just trying to understand sort of more of the procedure protocol.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
a good question, Perky. I've been involved in cases where painstakingly we had to attempt to retrieve classified that got out where it shouldn't be. It's painstaking, and you never quite are satisfied because you don't know who took a photo of that document, who copied it. And then, as you referenced, how about just verbal regurgitation of the key contents of the document? Add to that the more recent reporting that Trump was giving out, as an ex-president, was giving out burner phones. Think about this. He was giving out burner phones to world leaders, including in Saudi, so that he what as a Christmas present? Probably not in Saudi. Let me pick another holiday. Um, you know, there's no other purpose to hand out burner phones to people you want to have conversations with than to avoid intercept. And so he knows darn well what NSA is capable of. I don't think he can spell NSA, but he understands the capability. And he's thinking, okay, yeah, I probably don't want this conversation monitored. So, yeah, I'm going to give my buddy, the prince, a burner phone. You've got to be kidding me. And they must be laughing at him because rest assured, at nothing else, that government is recording the conversation for the possibility of using it against Trump someday, right? So he's just an idiot if he thinks that Putin, Russia, Saudi, anybody else he's having burner phone conversations with are not recording it for possible blackmail later on. But
If he was if he was a Caesar, he would be Caesar obsequious.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for the Latin. Um, you know, I'm laughing, but it's gravely serious. Someone who wants to be and has been president of the United States is trying to do an end around the National Security Agency. My Lord. So I'm sorry, I've digressed. I've done the Trump weave, but your question regarding painstakingly recovering classified. You mentioned the binders, the binder. I have some good news in an otherwise dark conversation. That binder was returned to DOJ, and faster than people realize. Because I myself, I got on TV and started screaming about, my God, there's a binder loose out there with classified in it. But I can tell you, I subsequently found out that the binder was returned, and it was returned by a lawyer who did the right thing. But
Wow. Well, thank you for letting me know about the binder. I didn't know it was returned. And that has been kind of horrifying me. And I didn't even think about the burner phone. So, yeah, that's a whole, like, this conversation is really scary on Halloween, I got to tell you.
Yeah, well, you do. I mean, the investigative look, the key investigative technique in recovering classified documents is interviews. You just keep interviewing people until you've run out of people to interview. In other words, at Mar-a-Lago, it could be the wait staff. It could be the cleaning staff. Hey, did you see this? Did you have access to this closet, this box in the ballroom? Did you come in on Tuesday when this was moved over here? It's painstaking, right? You just keep interviewing people. How about at New Jersey at the golf course? Did you see him wave a document? Wait a minute, was the landscaper here? I mean, literally, that's what you're doing to try and figure out if there's more copies somewhere that you haven't found yet.
So actually, before we go to Brand East, one of the things I was thinking about as you were saying that you guys sometimes run into where you have to kind of interpolate from. There's something here. Well, you see, he's texting this way. Well, he's texting this way, and you don't see this thing that they're at, but you kind of smell it, like it's there. And sometimes you probably never find it, but there's so many inferences to behavior. And I noticed, like when I was picking apart the Proud Boy indictments, because there were like at least 6 superseding indictments, right? And the first one had one bit of information, so of course that would give me some redacted names. And as we stack it around, you see that they have missing components that are made up by the interviews. But the link that they go through to wipe records and keep you guys, from being able to get through there is often bumbling, terribly bumbling. It usually gives away the crime. Yes,
It's true. It's tough if you're going to court with these, but the ability to piece together, it's a big puzzle, right? And what you just described is a part of that puzzle that hopefully comes together. And God, I hope someday this documents case is going to get tried before another judge. I'm hoping that the appellate court is going to put her in her place and actually tell her she needs to recuse herself. But we'll see. I mean, before that happens, she could be the next Supreme Court justice or U.S. Attorney General under Trump.
I've watched 1,000 videos of ISIS, and I just suddenly got scared. Brandy, that's yours. Go ahead. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me, and it's really an honor here. Frank, I've seen you on many occasions on TV. I found you rather insightful, and I'm very happy to have you on Spaces here, and hope it continues.
Thank you. Thanks for the kind words.
Sir. So I'm sitting here like typing questions and trying to consolidate and maximize my time here. So, but every time I finish a sentence, there's like more topics brought up. So I will not abuse my time here. So, number one, just buttressing this conversation, how do you assess the threat level of what I term the Mar-a-Lago infiltrators? I mean, there were, I think, many instances where I saw, photo ops taken on the golf course with questionable characters. Come to find out more details about Russian ties, and I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, and if you don't, that's okay. I can, you know what I'm saying. Like, it just seemed like an open door policy during the time before all the documents, or some of the documents, most of the documents, hopefully, if not all, were recouped. And then also the question about, like, how much of a concern is there about the fact that during the summits with Putin, did Trump have these private conversations that weren't recorded, or notes were not kept, and so forth? And thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Look, my friends in the Secret Service just refer generally to the nightmare of Mar-a-Lago, and by that they mean this concept that became a reality of having a hotel resort, golf club, event venue, also, be the residence of a president and an ex-president now. And their mission, the way they view their mission there, and it's really kind of the only way it logically could have been done in terms of their limited resources, which we're learning more and more about, is to view this as, look, we got to cover this residence, we got to cover his family, the security of his home, and do there on the grounds, and do regular electronic sweeps. But this idea that they could somehow, and everything's connected on this resort property, and somehow vet every single guest of every single member, simply wasn't happening. I mean, it just, and it's resulted in scenarios you just described. There's no question in my mind that, and it's been shown, that people with Chinese government connections, likely Chinese intelligence service connections, made their way onto the property. And whether it was directed or not, or whether it was more, hey, I'm going to do this and then I'm going to share it with my homeland, it's not entirely clear to me, but there have been numerous really troubling scenarios that showed foreign government related people where they should not have been on the property. So it's one thing to say, oh, well, look, the cousin of a MSS Chinese intelligence officer attended a wedding, had dinner, and went home. That's one thing. But to find that person wandering around and with electronic devices,
Oh my God.
in even making their way toward the residence or being found in the residence. I mean, it's unbelievable, and I don't think we've even begun to hear the stories, if we ever hear them, of foreign attempts and successful penetrations of Mar-a-Lago. Not, by the way, not to mention its proximity to the coastline, where
Absolutely. Exactly.
Coast Guard, they get to play real quiet in all of this, all the spotlights on the Secret Service. But Coast Guard played a very significant role in trying to protect from foreign service or even media attempts to intercept conversations on that patio out back at Mar-a-Lago, where reportedly, according to many guests, by the way, where Trump would eat dinner regularly with Melania and other guests. He'd grant audiences with guests. Oh, come on over, have a Coke. Oh, your daughter's getting married. Mazel tov. Come on over. Well, when he had foreign guests there, like the Japanese. What was his name at the time? They've gone through three different leaders, but he had a Japanese leader at the table, and he starts talking about, I don't know, plans for North Korea or something, and dinner guests, other members are overhearing this, or how we just dropped some bombs over here, and wow, yeah. So you've got a combination of a guy who has no sense of security, couldn't care less, with a physical setup that is absolutely not conducive to security.
Before I go, I have a question about the Iranian retaliation campaign against him. Definitely put that on the board so everyone else remember that. But before we get there, I was kind of, I like to think in a bit of humor about how he's so much of an anomaly that my old belief of Chinese espionage versus Russian espionage probably just got toppled. Now, here's my view has always been that the Russians are increasingly boorish, sloppy, constantly just all over themselves because they're impulsive and they make a lot of mistakes. Chinese probably make mistakes, but you just don't notice it. And their methods to extract, not be detected, they seem to get a lot further, a lot faster, and they don't make big noise. Well, if he's this sloppy, are they going to start making mistakes? Because forget it. Like, we don't really have to do any tradecraft or whatever because of spycraft, because this is just so easy now. So
he's made it. Yeah, he's made it very easy.
So do you think that it will change how they do things too, because it's going to get so sloppy? Will they get sloppy, or is it just they'll just be professional no matter what?
Well, I have to tell you, you're spot on generally with the kind of distinction between the Russians and the Chinese with regard to intelligence collection. And forgive me for those who've heard this old tale, but one of the old examples that floats around the intelligence community forever is, comparing the two services, the two governments. The Russian approach to collecting information, if it were grains of sand on a beach, would be to pull up a steam shovel to the beach, scoop up large amounts of sand, and pull away. The Chinese approach is to send one Chinese national at a time to pick up one grain of sand until there's no beach left. So It's a very, there's a more brutalist approach to the Russians. And
That's
if you
very
look
great
at
analogy,
Robert,
by the way. I like that. Thank you.
yeah, it's the mindset. Hey, we're in for the long term. Yeah, the Russians are going to get a lot fast, but it's ugly, and everybody's going to notice. But the way we do it, it'll take 100 years, but we'll take everything. And so, when you look at the Mueller indictments in the Russia Special Counsel investigation, look at the 24 or so Russians that he indicted. You want to talk about sloppy? I mean, for example, Mueller indicted 12 Russian GRU intelligence officers by name, and if you look at the report and the stuff in the indictments, my God, we had keystrokes. Not only did we have the address of the building that they were hacking from, and their names, but on Tuesday at 3 p.m., Boris typed the following into his search engine. Holy God! That's how we indicted these guys. So easily discoverable. Same for the oligarch-run propaganda operation, where a dozen Russians were indicted and not happy about it, by the way, friends of Putin. This operation gave Putin, arm's length plausible deniability. Hey, I don't know. I didn't. They're not mine. They're not. So sloppy. Figured out the whole thing. So yeah, they're sloppy, but they, what? They don't have to do much because we've screwed ourselves. They're sitting back, laughing their rear ends off at how easy totally dividing the
Well,
United
he was
States
so
was
determined
because
to
of
deny it. He
Donald
brought
Trump.
out his spokesperson. What's Putin's spokesperson again? Everyone else, what's the spokesperson's name?
Peskov.
No, the guy with the funny haircut. Trump. In Helsinki.
Oh,
I got you guys.
oh,
Y'all walked right into that.
oh.
Literally in Helsinki, he said a couple of weird things in that. Two reporters asked about the hacking operations, and
Yeah.
the first thing was when he was asked, Putin says, "Oh, well, he can answer, but first here I'll answer." And I went, "Oh, okay." Oh, wow. Okay.
Right. Exactly.
Go fog for it.
Exactly.
But then when they went to Putin, he goes, this trust thing, I mean, you can't trust anything. I don't trust him. He doesn't trust me. He works for his country. I work for mine. And I went, that's the playbook right there. He literally
Exactly.
handed everyone verbally so clearly, because one of the reasons why I'm running these hearings again these last few days is I think people forget these little things that got said that were pretty honest, strangely, And
True.
he put his spokesperson out there to tell us.
Yeah, look, when you have a man and his family who are motivated only by self-interest, profit motive, business, everything becomes transactional, and everything has been transactional for the Trumps, and that means you can own them very quickly, whether it's the Saudis or the Chinese or the Russians. Just dangle some building in front of them, and they'll be happy.
One more thing before we go to the hands, like I mentioned about the Qasem Soleimani triggering the Iranians to definitely go after Trump.
Oh,
Plus,
yeah.
they've been involved in the hacking campaign. The hack and dump campaign a little over a month ago was revealed. It's actually been percolating in the news for longer, but the indictment came down.
Yeah.
These personal grievances where a loudmouth president, which is actually, we could say, a president who's doing a perfectly good job, right, completely within the law, is still going to provoke national threats. Now, the Secret Service has their side of it, right? But you guys have a side that really keeps you very busy. Now you've got additional threat actors besides just Russia with that particular campaign. And I just don't, I think like when
True.
he went out and just said, I think I'll just whack that general. One of those Daily Beast guys called me. He goes, "You want to have anything to say about it?" I said, "Yeah, he had no plan." You think so? No, he had no plan.
Right.
He just went, "I think I'll take that guy out."
Yeah.
So what does that do for you guys?
I that seems to be the way he operates. I mean, on a very small domestic level, today he wasted a day going to New Mexico. New Mexico's not in play. Trump's not going to win New Mexico. Very, very small odds that would happen. But he blew his day basically in New Mexico today. That's not any advisors. That's not on any map that he has for strategy. He just said we're going in Mexico, and so he thinks, how can I make it right with Hispanics,
It's the weave.
Latinos? Where will we find a lot of Latinos? Hey, there's a place called New Mexico. Why don't we go there? Okay. Maybe there's Mexicans there. Okay. Same thing. This should scare us. The same thing with, hey, should we assassinate a general today? Let's hit Soleimani. And by the way, I want to be clear. I'm not shedding any tears over the
Oh,
loss
I
of
know exactly.
Soleimani.
It's just when you do it,
Yeah.
it's not like dealing with Al Qaeda. You have a nation state that's a little bit more coherent than
Yes.
Iraq was. Like
Yes.
a
And
lot
so,
more coherent than Iraq was.
yeah, you've got to think 5 steps ahead and think globally. And so here we are. Absolutely, it's been confirmed by the U.S. intelligence community that Iran wants him dead. And let me tell you something. They're not. This doesn't go away. He's for the rest of his life. He is going to live under a threat of assassination from Iran. And whether it's IRGC or whether it's a proxy of Hezbollah, I don't know. But are they capable of it? Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Have they put hit teams here before? Yes, they have. They do it around the world, and Hezbollah and or IRGC and others are quite capable of it. And it's actually been thwarted here with regard to hitting him. So it's for real. It makes things really difficult. Secret Service, I know they've been beat about the head and shoulders. Some of it deserved, some of it not. But that detail on him has to live with that kind of real threat. And of course, again, we digress. But all right, so you've got that very valid foreign state threat over your protectee. How the hell did Butler, Pennsylvania happen? How did the golf course thing happen in Florida?
Yes.
But that's another discussion for another day.
Well, I know that, let's get through these hands because we were keeping them holding. I don't remember the order, so I know Brand East was definitely holding first, but let's go. I think it's it.
I think
Go
Perky
ahead.
was first.
Fair enough. Thank you. I appreciate the honesty.
Yes,
Go
sir.
ahead, Perky.
Oh, thanks. I don't want to be doing a weave. And this is kind of taking us on a different topic. And I don't know if you want to invite this discussion, but I work with U.S. lawmakers. And I'm just curious if we could have a conversation about like what indicators or what evidence should I be looking for to determine if one of the lawmakers I'm working with, if they're compromised by foreign influence, particularly from adversaries like Russia, obviously. And I actually put a list up in the Nest, and this is not okay, Chris, like to go ahead and take it down, but I call it the Putin caucus.
No, go for it, of course.
Yeah, so given that the topic is countering threats to democracy, like I feel like our lawmakers is something that I just want to be better able to identify or look for specific indicators. I feel like I have a good sense of it. Like I feel like I know which lawmakers are doing it for political gain versus, actually pro Putin. But we do have some lawmakers that really have me concerned and questioning if they're compromised. So,
yeah. It's a serious question. And for those listening saying, boy, that sounds just kind of out there. Let me tell you something. It's not out there to suspect this. In my first book, The FBI Way, which to my amazement became a national bestseller, I was allowed, I say allowed because anything I write has to go through pre-publication review at FBI headquarters, but I was allowed, without mentioning a name, to, I think I gave 1 or 2 generic references to lawmakers who, when I was assistant director, I had to pay a visit on Capitol Hill. And, in those 2 instances, they involved different nations that we knew they were way too close to in terms of intelligence officers. And in one case, we knew that this lawmaker was officially considered to be an asset of a foreign intelligence service. And I had to look him in the eye and, let him know, we're on to you. We know what's going on. And he poo-pooed it, oh, and I by the way, I brought with me the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee at the time. So, if he wasn't going to listen to me, he was going to listen to this chairman. And he blew it off. And one of the signs to look for is kind of this arrogance, this hubris of, oh, I believe me, I'm not getting recruited. You've got to be kidding me. I know how to do this. I'm growing. I got this. And so, seeing somebody regularly meeting with people that you suspect are intelligence officers of a foreign country, an adversarial country in particular, is problematic. It's even more problematic if it's off the calendar, or you catch a reference to a meeting and wait a minute, that sounds like it was off the books. What's that? Kind of thing. And this arrogance of security briefings, not showing up at security defensive briefings, which are given all the time. The FBI Washington field office, God bless them, is responsible for briefing not just the members, but the staffers. I mean, the 20-something staffers who go have one drink too many at the local watering hole on Capitol Hill. You don't think the intelligence services are in there from Russia, China, and others places just looking for the one who has too many drinks every night? Of course they're in there. And these presentations get given, and you can tell who's taking them seriously and who's not, and whether the member shows up himself or herself or not. So this goes beyond just mere attitude, right? It's fine if you're wrong, but if a member thinks that we shouldn't be supporting Ukraine, okay, I think they're horribly misguided. Am I going to accuse them of being a Russian asset? No, but you now look at the other parts of the puzzle. What's there? Are there suspicions around foreign funds, donations? Is money being laundered? Are there visits being taken on so-called CODELs, congressional delegation visits? These CODELs had us really running around. There are countries that, and by the way, I'll include some allies in this mix, that as soon as you become a member of Congress, you're going to get an invite. And they're going to keep inviting you until you go visit their beautiful country. And they will put their hooks in you. And, you say, well, wait a minute, that has to be reported. Well, does it if the invitation comes from a nonprofit, from a PAC, through a third party? No, it doesn't. So, and the staff goes and everybody has a great time. And then, real problems happen after that, particularly if videotape is taken on some of those good times. So it's for real. If it's more than first of all, trust your gut, certainly. But if there's hard evidence, like, hey, this guy, he keeps meeting with this person this time, I don't see records of it. I think why does he keep using this phone when he has these conversations? Is it just fundraising, which they do use other phones for, because they aren't supposed to use taxpayer dollars for their campaigns? But no, there's another phone that he keeps using for this. It's more than just your gut. And look, the Bureau is there to have discussions with if things really become troublesome for you.
Indeed. Who was next? Was it Brand? Did your hand go down? Did you want to still go? Or do you want to go to some people who haven't?
I'm sorry. I would love to go. I'll be brief though.
Okay.
That was awesome because it just gives that extra bit of color, I think, to a lot of us who aren't on the inner belt of things and how they operate. But their suspicions and just the common sense kind of goes to everything you just said, Frank. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I have I have tons of questions. I'm going to give you one. So, because I think this goes to your wheelhouse, because I think you have the same concern in terms of domestic policy. How do you assess the threat level of domestic terrorism in terms of what the priority should be for the next administration in terms of addressing in terms of importance. And thank you.
Yeah, and when you say next administration, I assume you mean the next non-Trump administration, because I think we're in for more domestic terror, quite frankly.
Well, I tried to
with
that,
a
but yes.
Yeah. Although, look, there's also, I say that, and if Harris wins, we could really see a refueling of violent extremism here. I'll never forget when Obama was elected president. There was a record-setting number of threats against the president of the United States, and the Secret Service, knows that. And you say, "Gee, I wonder why that was." Well, it was the first Black American president, and let's not forget that the start of the Oath Keepers.
Now, he's not racist. He just didn't start doing it until Obama came in, brother.
Yeah. Well, the Oath Keepers planted their flag in Lexington, Mass, Chris?
Yeah, they did those musters. I was talking about how I watched those films the other night for the first time, planning to do a space with Dakota Adams perhaps this weekend. And I said, I need to go watch these things from, oh my God, this is terrible. Who does this? This is worse than like Ren Fair. And they're really into
it. But if you trace the roots back to some of these groups, like Oath Keepers, you're talking about racially driven hatred. You really are, and it's going to happen again. We now, if we end up having a woman of color, my God, she's got 3 strikes against her. She's Black and Indian and a woman. But the question about the longer term question about what should be done. Look, people who know me know you've now just given me an excuse to get on my soapbox. And that is that we still don't have a domestic terrorism law federally. And if you stopped the average person on the street and said, "Hey, do you think there's a law against domestic terrorism?" They would say, "Well, yeah, I think so. I got to be, right?" No, there isn't. We define domestic terrorism in the U.S. Code, but we do not have a law against it. And by the way, the definition looks very, very similar to the definition we have of international terrorism. And why do we even bother having a definition? Because you are allowed to use sentencing enhancements. So if you've committed a crime, let's say you've damaged the Capitol building, or you've robbed a bank to support, some domestic terror cause. The judge and the prosecutor are allowed to employ sentencing enhancements because you did it for domestic terrorism purposes. But there's not a domestic terrorism law, and we could spend the next 2 hours talking about why I think there should be and why many people think there shouldn't be. But I'll just give you this brief example. And I had this discussion live on national television with, what was it, live? No, it was taped, with Bill Maher on HBO's Real Time on his show a few years back. And I turned him around. I was if you ever watch Bill Maher, he's got that one-on-one guest up front in the show before he goes to the panel. I was the one-on-one guest, and we talked about the need for domestic terrorism law, and he didn't really see the need for it. And I turned him around, and one of the examples I gave him was this. If you rob a bank, if you're arrested for bank robbery, you are facing a stiff federal sentence of 10 years. And we do that because the U.S. has a strong interest in protecting its money, which it insures in your local bank. You don't get arrested for trespassing in the bank. You don't get arrested for theft. You get arrested for this really serious crime called bank robbery. But if you walk into the Capitol and beat up a few police officers on the way and smash the windows and do millions of dollars of damage in an attempt to overturn a peaceful transfer of power, a legitimate election result, we still arrest you for trespass and damage to property and interfering with the government and stealing Nancy Pelosi's laptop. We don't arrest you for domestic terrorism because we don't have a law called domestic terrorism. Now, some of the leadership, of course, of Oath Keepers and Proud Boys were arrested for seditious conspiracy, very serious charge. But everybody else, pretty pretty garden variety charges. So that kind of turns a lot of people around. Wait a minute, you rob a bank, you're 10 years federal crime called bank robbery. You try to stop a legit election and peaceful transfer of power, and it's vandalism to property and theft. An assault on an officer. No, my argument is that's not enough. I'm sorry. And so, we've had all of our leaders come out, including the FBI director, and say, hey, what happened on January 6th was domestic terrorism. It easily matches the definition. So, what needs to get done in the next administration beyond Trump? We need a law. I'd love to have a law. The FBI Agents Association says they're handcuffed in terms of tools. There's a reason why we've stopped an iconic act of international terrorism on U.S. soil since 9/11, because we're all over it. I mean, if you, in an extreme example, but really not extreme, if you order a pizza tonight or DoorDash, and the guy who comes to your door with that delivery is under surveillance by the FBI because he's a known or suspected member of ISIS or Al Qaeda, guess what? The next day, they're all over you to make sure that wasn't some secret communication or delivery of something. They're on you. That's because it's international terrorism, and your mere association could subject you to FBI examination. We have nothing like that for domestic terrorism. And so I'm just saying, be nice to have a law. That's all I'm saying. And so that's one thing. The other thing is longer term. We're talking about
Your show
literally
here,
deprogramming people.
Host here is a little different. We have air raids from time to time, like we do right now, to remind people that war is real. But I want to stay on the topic with this. Hold on, I need to get Mark Hamill out of my ear. he's telling me, air raid, take notice. Make sure that your safety is good. Thank you, Mark Hamill.
That's very nice.
The tools that will be bridged from that came up when the Epic server was leaked, the 10 gigabytes or so, because you know me, I had to collect all that stuff and go through all of it. And I started calling like Schenectady Police Department and say, hi, you currently have Officer so-and-so on staff. Do you have fraternization rules in your charter? Or do you have someone there that can answer some basic questions? I'm sorry, who's speaking? Yeah, Chris Sampson, counterterrorism researcher, and I have some questions about the Epic server. Please hold. And they didn't know what to say because they weren't ready for it. They had no policy. And I was asking pretty much in the line of what you were saying, this very serious question. And essentially I got the gaslight on it, right? But it's, if it were ISIS, Jabhat al-Nusra, something like that, it'd be night and day. But if it's Oath Keepers, and they had already been adjudicated, they had already been found guilty, so it was pretty easy to see that, So,
well, it's a complex issue, right? Because I advocate for a law, but I'm very concerned about designating people or even groups domestic terror organizations, because a president like Trump has already tried to abuse that. We don't have a mechanism. People. Yeah. The famous tweet by Donald Trump: "I hereby declare Antifa a domestic terrorism organization," and somebody had to tell him, "We don't have a mechanism. We don't declare terror organizations domestically. We do it internationally." Oh, okay. But rest assured, he'll declare NBC News a domestic terror organization, since now he can do whatever he wants. So I make that distinction because I think it would be heavily abused, but not the law. The law is easy. Here, did you do this over here in this definition? Yeah, good. You're getting charged with domestic terror.
Exactly, and the fact that there are ways that you could do a better job, or you're retired, but the feds could do a better job. And I've said this to people as an intermediary who doesn't have to obey the Fourth Amendment the way you guys do. So if I get invited in, like, oops, I got invited in. I'm a researcher. By the way, I found something. Hey, feds, I found something. That's how that works. But it's then you get it, and you're sitting there scratching your head, like, well, if this was any other group, we could do something, and we can't. Let's go to these hands so we don't keep them waiting. And thanks for staying with us, by the way, Goodman. Who's next?
Yep.
Justin, do you know the order of the hands? Show of respect. You guys know what the order is.
I can't see all the hands, Chris.
Patty, it's you.
Oh, well, thank you. Um, Frank, thank you for being here. I really, really,
Sure.
really appreciate you being here. Um,
Thank you.
I wanted to ask as early as maybe even before May of 2017, uh, we saw, Trump meeting with Lavrov and uh, kind of giving out another country's information. And I wanted to find out how that affected how things worked for you. Once other countries started finding out that the information that they were, because I know that all the different agencies they work with foreign uh, I guess adversaries and etc. Um, to pull information together. And so I wanted to find out how that affected you and how it may have changed things for you, knowing that a president was divulging information, classified information that way.
Right, and for the listeners, what she's talking about is that he was bragging about ISIS information, and the leak essentially was information they did not have, and their partner was pissed.
Boy, were they.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, importantly for chronology's sake, when you say how did it affect me, probably we should point out that I had been retired while that was going on. But I'll tell you where. So it's not only the allies reportedly that, through my contacts with colleagues, former colleagues, that were really questioning the relationship, right? And the good news is the allies weren't coming to the American agencies and saying, look, we aren't going to do business with you anymore. But they were starting to say, we don't think we can share the most sensitive information and sources we have with you. And that just sent people reeling. But I want to tell you what was even really more compelling, some of the anecdotes I heard, which had to do with human sources. Think about the effort that goes into a CIA officer or an FBI agent spending sometimes years trying to recruit a certain target with key access, someone in a foreign adversarial service or government, and convincing them to betray their country, maybe even do something that could get their family killed. And then they make that decision to play for Team America. And they even are given extraction plans. We're going to exfiltrate you if things go haywire. And we're going to try to get your wife and kids out, but we don't know if we can. But here's the signal you'll get if the jig is up, and we'll try to get you out safely. But, basically, this is a decision you can never return, from making. And so when human sources look at an officer or an agent and say, you've got a bumbling idiot for a president, and is he going to get stuff that I report to you? Because I'm reporting on a world leader. And if it gets to his desk and it says, H next to it for human intelligence, if Jared Kushner is seeing human and telling the Saudis, you've got somebody reporting around the king's desk or the prince's desk. That's a dead man. And so what I was hearing was that human sources were saying, I can't do this anymore. I trust you. I trust my life with you, but I can't trust that man in the Oval Office. That's what really turned things around.
Thank you for answering that.
Sure.
By the way, I put your Miami Book Fair event in the book thing up there in the Nest for Long Haul. For those of you who either are in the Miami area or you want to pay attention to that, that's up in the Nest. So to the
Thank
next
you.
answer, great place to come do promos. By the way, this is what we do the Nest thing with.
Hey,
Who's
Chris,
next? Yes,
could I interject something here? Because my question is a follow-on to that.
that's fine. Yes.
Thank you very much. And thank you. I'm so bummed I missed the beginning of this. I'm going to listen to this. I actually liaised with your counterintelligence guys from DOD and amazing group of folks. But one question. So, what happens if you roll the ball along and in the unlikely event, the plane flips upside down and Trump gets elected? What the heck is going to happen with our intelligence relationships if he goes through with this plan not to get anybody cleared at a senior level?
Yeah.
That's mind-boggling. How do we protect
It is.
anyone?
Yep. So there used to be some guardrails, like, for example, IGs, inspector generals at each of the agencies, and even inspector general for the intelligence community, inspector general for DOJ, oversees the FBI and all the DOJ agencies, inspector general at DHS, who had their hands full with Secret Service issues, inspector general for DOD. They used to be a place where employees could go and say, look, I'm witnessing waste, fraud, abuse. I see corruption. I see law breaking. And they're going to get some traction with that. We've already heard about Trump's opinion of IGs. He doesn't like them. And so famously, in small part, because the DOJ IG at the time, who reviewed the opening of Crossfire Hurricane, the Russia investigation that got the whole special counsel going, right? And what did the IG say at DOJ? Hey, you may not like to hear this, but that Russia case at the FBI, that was legitimately predicated. They should have opened that case. That was legit to open. There were serious concerns about Russia and the Trump campaign. Well, Trump said that's enough of that. And so he doesn't like IGs. And rest assured, there either won't be any IGs or the IGs will answer to the White House. And this goes way beyond that. If you look at Project 2025, there's discussion of the FBI and the fact that, look, this idea of this independent FBI, we don't like that. We're going to probably have 2 deputy attorney generals overseeing the FBI. That's going to be their day-to-day function, running the FBI. And guess what? Those 2 deputy attorney generals, they're going to answer to Trump. They'll answer straight to the White House. So essentially, you're going to have a secret police run by Donald Trump called the FBI. But now let's not stop there. Let's remember the attorney general, the FBI director, of course, all the U.S. attorneys routinely turn over. The FBI director does not turn over. For those of you who don't know, that the FBI director is, by law, is supposed to serve a 10-year term. Try telling that to Jim Comey, who didn't make it anywhere near that. And by the way, it looks like maybe Chris Wray won't make it. And that's a deliberate thing, right? So you could have some new apolitical neutrality and cross and straddle various presidents. But I digress. This gets worse because Project 2025 talks about doing away with civil service protections. It talks about going to essentially a loyalty test where it's not just the FBI director and the CIA director and the AG that change over, but it's the top echelon. It's the top echelon of those agencies. So if imagine an FBI where the senior executives have all essentially taken a pledge to Trump. They have to demonstrate, they have to fill out forms. Hey, who's your favorite president? What's your view of government? Well, imagine now at the head of every FBI field office, the one nearest you, there's 56 field offices, has taken some kind of MAGA pledge and has been handpicked. And the U.S. attorney in that district, who makes the prosecutive decisions, has been handpicked. You won't see a public corruption case opened against a Republican. You won't see his counterintelligence case opened against a Russian. The scenario is pretty darn bad, and the names being kicked around like, oh yeah, don't be surprised if somebody named Kash Patel becomes the director of the FBI. A man who just made up stuff around the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case by saying, oh yeah, no, I was there in the room when Trump declassified everything in his head. I was there. I saw him declassify this in his head. Oh, okay, all right. Let's make you the head of the FBI. These are things that scare me. Now, could some reason prevail? Could people get to Trump and go, hey, you got to have some serious people in these positions. They can be loyal to you, but they got to at least be serious people who can sit down with a foreign counterpart, the Brits, the Canadians, that we work with every day. I mean, I don't think a week went by when I was the head of counterintel at FBI where I didn't talk to the Canadians or the Brits or the Aussies. Really, it was all the time. We shared everything. We got amazing stuff done. And I don't know.
Which is actually one of the things as I grew up from being a silly progressive kid to a wiser progressive kid, was that when people would rant about spying on our adversaries, they had a problem with it. But if we spy on our allies, they would lose their shit about it in a way that I said, but you don't understand what the difference is. What? Okay, so you're on the phone with Germany, right? And you're making this trade deal. And then Germany gets a phone call and says, oh, I hate to tell you this, we were listening in, and what you didn't know was that phone call you just had, yeah, they didn't tell you about this, and this. Oh, really? Yeah. Oh, thanks. Sorry, we do. And there's a lot of these ways that things get corrected when, let's say it's Germany talking to China. And one of the allies calls in and goes, yeah, they didn't tell you the following just happened yesterday. Oh, thanks.
Yeah. The intel agencies really serve a purpose and really do defend the interests of the United States. I wish I had an answer as to what this is going to look like, but I can tell you, crossing our fingers and hoping for the best isn't a plan. The pressure would have to be immense, and I'm gladly going to help lead that if we need to, which would be to just demand of our elected representatives that they not confirm some of these potential knuckleheads that Trump may appoint. The problem is, I'm convinced he'll try to go around the appointment process by naming a lot of actings. So don't be surprised if we see everybody in an acting position.
Straightforward. Do you have time if we just run through these hands and say no more hands, but we'll let these guys ask their questions and then we'll do a wrap up. And partially, I think it would be great if you come back. I think they like you. I knew they would.
Well, that's very kind. How many more hands are there, Chris?
I see 4. So I think if everyone keeps them short and straightforward,
yeah,
we can.
I'll try to be more concise as well.
Oh, you can take your time.
No.
Do the bob and weave. Who's next? Show of honor of hands.
Is it okay if I go?
That's fine, Edward.
Okay, thanks for your service. And this is kind of going to be a kind of quick answer question.
Good.
When a CEO has maybe security clearance and talks to a foreign leader, does any kind of reporting have to occur with that? And also, have we ever nationalized a U.S. corporation? Thank you.
Oh, boy. Okay, so first question is easy. Yes, a cleared CEO, easy example would be the defense industry, of course, right? And they meet with foreign leaders all the time. And yes, much to their chagrin, a record is kept of that. And then in order for that institution and for that CEO to maintain their clearance, the Defense Department, Defense Security Service, or whatever they call themselves these days, is going to ask for a record of that, either quarterly or annually. And it usually falls on their unfortunate admin assistant to keep a record of all that travel and all those meetings. Oh, second question, much more difficult. Have we ever nationalized? Okay, so this is a smart group. I can tell this, but help me out. During COVID, I know that there was talk of and by the way, the Republican side was adamantly against this. And by the way, I see the point. I see the point. But wasn't there at least talk of nationalizing one or more of the pharmaceutical companies or supply companies during the COVID period? Anybody got something on that? And if we didn't do it, I think it's been done. And I'm going to say right now, I am not a historian, but I believe in American history. Likely in wartime, we may have nationalized a corporation. But please, somebody with a greater knowledge of history, help me out.
All I see is that it was definitely chatter at that time. I literally just typing it in. There are really quality, including like University of Michigan Law School.
Yeah.
You know, the path to nationalizing the U.S. pharmaceutical industry, et cetera. And I can say, like, I don't
Yeah.
really completely know how it works here in Ukraine, but I can go down to what we call apteka, which is the pharmacy, and it's ridiculously different in price. And they're everywhere. Like everyone here knows you're going to need medicine, and it is a whole different attitude about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know the industry. So as I think about this, I believe we never pulled the trigger during COVID and nationalized one of the big pharma companies to produce the vaccines, in part because they were adamantly opposed and said, "Hey, whoa, we're going to do what you just tell us what you need done. How many vaccines do you need? Please don't nationalize us." And I think that's how it went. But going much further, World War II, I wonder if whether one of the car companies was told to make Jeeps or something, and we nationalized. But forgive me, I don't know for sure.
I think Eisenhower got himself in a bit of a squeeze, messing around with the steel industry or talking about it, and got a huge amount of pushback during the Korean War, if I'm not mistaken.
That sounds right.
Yeah,
that sounds right. Look, I mean, it's a problem. If you literally, I mean, is that a slippery slope to the government taking companies over for more than just a national emergency?
I'm just thinking of certain satellites. There's just certain satellites in my mind right now that I just want to take those satellites and use them for communications.
Oh, I got you. Yeah.
So I think Skykiss hasn't spoken, I believe. So let's do it this way. We'll do Skykiss, Table Fox, and then Brand East, and then we'll. Seabiscuit. I see you, Seabiscuit. That's the order.
Well, okay. So my questions. First of all, welcome to your first space, Frank. And I'm a long time follower. I mean, 5, 6, 7 years since MSNBC.
Wow.
Oh yes, followed.
Yeah, but so thank you for that. And you say 7 years, you're on the money. I've done this for exactly 7 years.
It was just a guess. It was just a guess. Okay.
Yeah.
So we've talked about a number of things here. First of all, I want to say that the secret meetings with Putin and other leaders, and definitely classified documents at Mar-a-Lago, these things just send total chills, to my core. It's and that meeting with Lavrov and the other guy in the Oval Office, I was screaming at the television. I could not believe what was going on. So what I want to ask you goes back to the discussion about domestic terror, and how should we frame a request to lawmakers, begging them to at least consider some sort of domestic terror law. That's it.
Well, I appreciate that, because we need more people saying we need this to be examined and we need it to happen. I will tell you, there's one of the senators, and of course, there's no way on God's green earth that a Republican controlled House or Senate is going to do this. It first would take Democratic control of both the House and the Senate. Number one, unfortunately, in the near term. Now, the people who keep proposing bills, and boy, they get more and more watered down every year. They're looking like this. We think that the FBI and the DOJ should make sure they have enough people for domestic terrorism. And they should do a research project and report back to us in 2 years about how bad that's what these domestic terror bills are looking at right now. And of course, that's not what I'm talking about. The FBI doesn't need any more research or any bigger sections, because they have entire sections dedicated to this problem. That's not what they need. They need a law. And the reason why is because the investigative tools are not there as they are for international terrorism. If you, as an FBI agent, walk into your assistant U.S. attorney's office there and you say, "Hey, have I got a trespass case for you?" They're going to look at you and go, "Look, I don't know what you're talking about, but if you're saying we're going to end up charging some guy for or trespass or whatever, some gun charge, I got other things going right now." But if you walk into that office and say, "I've got a domestic terrorism prosecution for you," that makes a world of difference. So in crafting a letter, you can look up the FBI Agents Association, and it's very rare that the Agents Association ever comes out on behalf of any legislation. They may have done it like 3 times in my entire life. And they came out a couple of years back and said, we don't have what we need investigatively. And it should be a focus on the investigative tools that are similar to what we do in international terror, that keeps us out front proactively, preventively. What do I mean by that? Like I said, if you're, God forbid, associated with a designated international terror group, here comes the court-ordered wiretaps, the undercover agents, the development of informants, getting in that chat room and making sure you're not talking about blowing something up. That does not exist on the domestic terror side of the house. You almost have to wait for the explosion. I mean, the young man who ended up being the El Paso Walmart shooter was in a chat room. Someone in that chat room, not an informant, had to say to himself, "This is scaring the hell out of me. This kid's really scaring us," right? And they had to go to law enforcement. You can't. That's not a way to run an outfit, right? You can't wait for the militia group. And by the way, this does happen sometimes. It happened with the plot to kidnap Governor Whitmer in Michigan. One of the guys had to go, "Okay, whoa, wait a minute. We're not kidnapping the governor, are we?" And that's what. But we don't wait for that on the international side of the house. So anything that focuses on the investigative tools that will get us the traction and attention and the severity of consequences, so that we can be proactive, that law enforcement can be proactive. And Senator Amy Klobuchar, I think just about every year tries to submit a bill, and everybody just kind of blows it off like, no, it's never going to pass. So that's the key, is the investigative tools.
That's it. Thank you. Skykiss is one of our, like she said, she's one of these spaces, people that pays attention to the news. I've said this before. Some of you live on that news. You wake up in the morning, you doom scroll, right? That's what I would be doing. I do it because I'm trying to figure out where that goddamn drone went. Go ahead, Table Fox.
Thanks, Chris. Firstly, Frank, I'd just like to thank you for coming on the space to speak with us all tonight. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I only came up to speaker because one of Elon's minions was throttling me so hard I couldn't hear you speak. But I do, however, have one question. I did actually really want to speak to you about Comey's decision back in 2016, but I might leave that tonight. I was kind of interested how the counterintelligence agency in New York was compromised by the Russians and how that affected his decision. But I'm going to go on about, so let's see, where was I? We've learned through numerous reports that Elon Musk has been in contact with Putin. And considering Starlink is a strategic asset, and as reported by Business Insider, Putin once asked Elon Musk to not activate Starlink over Taiwan as a favor to Xi Jinping. Could this lead to a nationalization of SpaceX and Starlink? And what precautions are in place to stop this abuse of power? And how would this affect his security clearance? Thanks again, Frank.
Yeah, sure. So we did earlier in the evening talk about this issue. Let me not totally evade your first your would-be question, which would be the Comey thing and his decision. I addressed that far more fully in my first book, and so I'm not shamelessly trying to get you to look at my first book, The FBI Way, but I do address Comey and that really unfortunate decision of his, which I believe, and certainly Hillary Clinton believes, changed the outcome of the election and brought us Trump. If you don't want to believe me or Hillary Clinton, you can ask Jim Comey's wife, who also told Jim, you screwed this up. So we have that. Yeah, it's rough. Okay, so we did address the Elon Musk Putin thing, but when you say abuse of power, are you talking about Elon's abuse of his power, or are you talking about the possibility of nationalizing Starlink being a government abuse of power?
Well, mostly I'm thinking about it from the aspect of Elon controlling Starlink and the fact that he was accused by the Iranians of turning it off during a mission to hit some ships in Crimea. And then the fact that Putin asked him to basically not allow it over Taiwan. And that kind of affects geopolitics, which is normally the domain of the president or the White House.
For sure. So here's the thing that first, let's start with the clearance. And for those, I'll quickly hit this because we have discussed the clearance problem. There's a problem. As I said, if it were me and my clearance, and I was in regular conversation with a Russian government official, for that matter, a cousin who happened to be in Moscow, I would have to report all of that. I'd get polygraphed, the whole 9 yards. It would be a problem. I have no idea if Elon Musk has reported his contacts with regard to his clearances. And nor am I convinced that his security clearance would be under review, but it better damn well be under review. But as you bring up, there's a much larger issue here, which is, what do we do with him? What do we do with him, and what do we do with Starlink? And one of the things I had the privilege of sitting when I was the head of counterintel at FBI, of sitting on a committee called the CFIUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. One of the things that should be done immediately is a full, true review of Starlink's funding. If he's getting a dime from foreign governments to fund Starlink, we should be treating it as a CFIUS matter. And for those of you who don't know, CFIUS is most of the intelligence community, certainly State Department, certainly Treasury, sitting at the end of the table, determining literally whether a company needs to divest itself of any foreign entanglements because it's too vital to the United States, or whether the U.S. government should do any business with a certain company if they choose not to divest themselves. As you can imagine, fascinating meetings. There's a whole unit at FBI headquarters called the CFIUS unit that researches all of this and weighs in on it. That needs to happen quickly. Really, where's the money coming from for Elon Musk and his enterprises? And the other thing is, I hate being reliant on one singular source. So while we're figuring out Elon Musk and Starlink, why don't we, and we're reviewing his clearance, why don't we start, trying to do business with someone who's going to get it right and isn't so concerned about dealing with adversaries? And in the same breath, I'm going to say what I said earlier. I got the 30,000 foot level. I understand Elon Musk is cutting edge. I'm fascinated by what he's doing. I'm fascinated by what I saw, 2 weeks ago, was it, when the rocket landed where it started? Holy cow, jaw dropping. Amazing stuff going on. And yes, should there be a little leeway for an amazing person doing amazing things? Yeah, but I'm not willing to compromise national security for it. So we've got to get this figured out. But in the meantime, I hate the fact that there's like singular source reliance on Starlink in some places, and that Trump can call them up and tell them to, hey, move Starlink over the hurricane affected areas in the Carolinas, please. For me, do it for me. That has to stop. That there has to be a far more controlled strategy for use of Starlink.
Cheers. Thank you for that.
Solid.
Oh, I must actually, I must
you.
check
Thank you,
out your
man.
book because I was very interested in the first question, but I'll read the book. Thanks again, man.
Thank you.
And again, if you guys forget what it is, when you look at the live stream, it's up on the screen. FBI Way is the first book. The Long Haul is the second book, which we should get into another space. I think it's a great book to talk about. And it's his current book, which is a really deep dive in truck stop murders. And I know if you didn't hear his podcast, he was going in through these forensic labs and these lost cases, and it's a really fascinating area of crime. So let's go to Brand East, and then Seabiscuit.
Hey, thank you so much. And gosh, I really appreciate the time to ask all my questions. And Frank, please continue coming on spaces because it's definitely advantageous to all of us and more.
Thank you.
So
Thank
I
you.
have one question. So you gave the 30,000 foot view. I want to know the 60,000 foot view. So in 1956, Khrushchev said, excuse me, that we will take America, but without, and I'm paraphrasing, but we'll take America without firing a shot. We will destroy you from within. And so my question is, this is something that I struggle with. It seems that America and our best brains would have a good sense of how to analyze the threat posture over the long term from our enemies abroad and devise a plan or a series of plans to mitigate any risk, any threat posture, any game theory. And that's something I struggle with because I don't see it in play, right? I guess I don't see the result of it, but I see the game playing out. And so my question to you would be, do you see a certain mindset of how you could argue that we're in control of all of this because we're just kind of laying our cards close to our chest and waiting for the game to play out? Or are we really on our back foot in terms of how to respond to the actual actions that are happening in the world? And thank you for your time.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's an hour-long conversation right there. The answer is this is a very lawyer-like answer. It depends. It depends on the conflict, the tension, the dilemma that you're referring to, because if we break it down, it seems more manageable. So, for example, just an example, I think we're always playing catch up with regard to technology and threats, and I view AI as both an amazing thing for our future that may literally cure diseases, and I view AI as a serious threat, perhaps even existential threat. And are we always behind on technology? Always. We've always been behind on technology. With regard to world conflict and global issues, there's good news here in that there's always, having had the government hat on, particularly at the level I was at in the intelligence community, I'm here to tell you, and many of you have had these opportunities as well in the government. There's a lot more out there than we can see in the public eye. The gaming, the exercises, the what ifs, the books that you literally exercise and drill all the time. To include, by the way, to my amazement, a worldwide pandemic. We still managed to screw that up, in my opinion. Yeah, the smallpox and the biochem attacks, and what if China takes Taiwan while we're defending Israel against Iran, and we're supporting Ukraine against Russia, North Korea. What if all that happens at the same time? That's rehearsed. That's done. And this is why the continuity is so important. And when you see me seemingly get incensed over the possibility of Trump putting people in who don't know what the hell they're doing, and so-called get rid of the deep state, which what means anybody who's been there more than 10 years? Is that what that means to you? What does it mean? Because that cadre of career professionals at the Pentagon and at CISA and the Bureau and DOJ and CIA, that's where the success is. It's that 30-year employee who's been to all of that, knows where the playbook is. So a lot of that goes on. I think this weird stuff, though, had anybody, I wonder, and nobody could tell us because it's classified, but, did anybody at the Pentagon think, hey, what if someday North Korea sends 10,000 troops to Russia? What, had anybody think of that? I don't know. Who probably thought about it? Because I saw this at FBI. Some career intelligence analyst at a fairly low level, right? And I say low level not to denigrate anybody, but I'm talking about the government pay scale, right? I'll bet you some intel analyst went, yeah, I told you this. I told you North Korea was going to send troops. I'm telling you. And South Korea is going to flip out, because people, I'm sure people are saying, well, this is easy. Just vaporize 10,000 North Korean troops. Tell Ukraine to take them out. Okay, hold on. Chris talked about this earlier. Wait a minute. There's a global reaction. South Korea might want to have something to say about that because they're going to experience the immediate repercussions of such an attack, perhaps. So, is there a grand strategy of things? I feel relatively confident telling you, based on my experience, that a lot of this is absolutely rehearsed, drilled, and I mean a lot of these exercises. When you see, the United States will be exercising in the naval area of, but that, yeah, you don't know what that's about, but there's a strategy and a theory being worked out. So it does happen. The black swan events, the tsunami that occurs at the exact same time as a major earthquake underneath 6 nuclear reactors in Japan. That could be black swan, and that's what concerns me. Is that you remember the Academy Award winning movie a few years ago? The name of it was Everything Everywhere All at Once, and yeah, that's an issue.
That's the root. Seabiscuit, you've got the question there.
Thank you. Before I ask my question, I just want to preface with a quick response. The Pentagon and the National Security Agency and the CIA, they know a lot of what's going on, and it's not that they're not prepared or they don't have plans. It's almost like they have to try to sell their plans to the White House or to the administration, and there's just so much of it that the administration literally cannot take it all. There's so much going on in the world, it's mind-boggling. Yep. But now my question to you is this, is that what is the precedent? Because this is the first time we're kind of, well, it's not the first time, but what is the precedent if we have a sitting president, okay, who has extraordinary powers in terms of declassifying information, who sells, or not necessarily sells, but who offers up national security information, top secret information, to foreign powers in exchange for personal favors? Now, we know what the penalty is for a regular federal service employee and for an intelligence community individual, but what of the president of the United States? The fact that we even have to ask this question in itself is pretty profound. But go ahead.
Well, I mean, your question is not hypothetical, is it? We don't know for sure, of course, that Donald Trump shared any classified for personal benefit with any government or entity. Um, it's a good hunch, but it's not defensible right now. If Jack Smith, let me assure you, if Jack Smith could have charged true espionage, giving up national defense information, he would have done it. If he had the evidence, he would have done it. He may have
But
some, but
can
he
we? The question
clearly
is,
has.
can we do that to a sitting president?
Well, so now, all right. So for the key part of your question was the last few words, which was for personal benefit, right? The dilemma that I have run into in my career, without getting into any details, more than once, have been high level officials in government who decide not for personal benefit, but because they think they can, and it's part of their negotiation or diplomacy with another country. They think they can give up classified and just do it on their own authority without any repercussions and with kind of a blinders on, like, hey, do you understand what you just did, because it's bulging out over here and you have no knowledge of that. And that was a frustrating part of my career, dealing with stuff like that, because you get this thing of, who the hell are you to tell me what I can do in my job? And if I want to give up classified, I can give up classified, and I'm not doing it for personal benefit. When you insert the personal benefit picture, you're squarely falling into an illegal scenario. But the problem is who's on the Supreme Court at the time, right? And what is the definition of official? And what is the definition of personal? So if it's, and it's seldom is it this black and white. It's seldom going to be Donald Trump wants to build a tower in Saudi Arabia, so Jared Kushner gave the Saudis this intel on their assassination of the Washington Post journalist Khashoggi. That's tough to prove. Although, by the way, that may have happened. Just saying. Can't prove
Wink,
it.
wink.
Yeah, yeah. But the personal. So the thing I'm clinging to with hope is your last three words: for personal benefit. I believe that puts us squarely in. If it's a president, yeah, he's under. And again, we're into this nightmare scenario where I was about to tell you, sure, an attorney general, an FBI director, they're going to go for it on that. Yeah. Well, guess what? We've just had Judge Aileen Cannon decide that special counsels are unconstitutionally appointed. We might have an attorney general whose name is, I don't know, Rudy Giuliani. Who the hell knows? We might have an FBI director who's Kash Patel. We might have a Secretary of Defense who is General Mike Flynn, twice convicted about lying about his contacts with the Russians. So under what circumstance would those people try to prosecute their boss? Probably zero.
Thank you for your explanation. I appreciate that.
Sure.
I just want to also
If we
say one last thing.
Good.
We're living in some pretty precarious times, and I know that the word espionage gets thrown around a lot, and it almost seems like Hollywood-esque, but it's something that actually does happen in the intelligence community quite a lot. But I would also like to entertain the idea of possibly bringing back the term and use it often in the legal term of treason, and what high treason actually means and what the consequences of high treason is in a society, especially when the stakes are extremely high and the welfare and the safety of millions of people are at stake. These are things that we don't really talk about because when we think of treason, we think of something in like medieval times, right? But treason does exist. And I think it's something we should definitely talk a lot about more. Thank you.
Got it. Yeah, I will point out treason is something. There's clearly a need for greater education of the American public around and understanding how it's defined in the law. It gets thrown around and has been, but as someone who's has the law degree and has investigated cases, it's important we all know a lot more. So I'm with you on increasing exposure and knowledge of the treason statute.
So instead of questions, though, because these are three of our finest ladies who are our regulars, I want to at least give them a chance to say hi and goodbye for the night, because we'll have to do another. But we have a lot of items that literally we picking apart. What's up with Mike Flynn, General Valeri, these people, the First Praetorian Guard. But I want to see how this election plays out over the next few days, right?
Yeah.
See how these guys. What are their moves? Because he was in that crowd in the back with the First Praetorian Guard guys playing weird little intel guys, right? And then there's a couple of other, items that came up during this space that we'll kind of take some notes. Go, that was a good area to explore and more learning to have. So, Joanna, then Jane and Shovel, and let's just basically thank our guest. And I didn't want you guys to be excluded. I know you were very happy to come to this space.
Thank you so much, Chris. Yeah, I had to work late today, so I missed this, and I'm so sad because really, this is my favorite thing to talk about. Although I have to say, Mr. Figliuzzi, you painted such a vividly horrible picture of Rudy Giuliani. I mean, that just gave me, a heart attack just now. But my
Perfect for a Halloween special. Sorry,
exactly.
Joanne.
No, it's okay, Shovel. Exactly.
Yeah,
It's a
it's true.
Halloween
True.
story. So my question is, and I'm not sure if this has already been asked, but I'm, because I missed it. But at the 30 inches level, right? You're talking about 30,000 feet. At the 30 inches level, a lot of us are out here really swinging in the trenches against disinformation every day. Working really hard at it. A lot of people that I see down here in this space work really hard to promote a fact-based narrative and reality, especially around Russian disinformation and, of course, Iranian and Chinese disinformation. My question is, because I woke up this morning feeling exhausted by it all, can you give me sort of, and this dovetails on what Brand East was saying about us not being able to really tell where our backup is, because we have this fire hose of weaponized disinformation coming out of these foreign actors, and we're out here just like a bunch of people with putting it together as best we can and having help from people like you. And we have plenty of people that have some experience, but I just wanted to know if you had any sense about how that war is being fought, and is there any sort of concept or idea that we need to have people in the field doing that work every day, just as Russia and China and all of those foreign actors that want to see us destroyed? Is there anybody out there doing that, or is it really on us?
Yeah, I got it. Yeah. So a great question. And again, probably the good enough for an hour of discussion. Real quick. The government has taken a crack at this, and it didn't go well because, again, the very stuff that divides us, a lot of social media, a lot of propaganda, disinformation, misinformation, is reflecting the division in our elected officials. So when, for example, the short-lived idea of a kind of government truth office, which it was labeled, attached to DHS, came into fruition, I believe they even named the head of the office, people flipped out. Right? They go, whoa. This sounds like a truth office. Are you kidding me? Is the government going to be telling us what to believe and not to believe? So that fizzled. Then when it was mischaracterized, this really does incense me, the so-called Twittergate, where even Elon Musk has come out and said, hey, listen, that was kind of overblown. The FBI didn't come and tell Twitter, you take this down, or that Hunter Biden's laptop is actually a Russian plant, which, by the way, I get accused of having said. And if you pull all of my appearances, that's not what I said. I said that what the government said, which was that the Russians were exploiting the Hunter laptop for purposes on social media, and the FBI simply gave a heads up to the social media platforms and said, "Hey, look out! These accounts over here, Russian government, and the Russian government's going to be really hitting this Hunter Biden thing hard. So just be careful who you're platforming. You know, who you're giving a platform to." And it was the folks at some of the platforms, including Twitter, who said, gosh, I guess that means we should take some of this down, you know? And so why have I been bringing this up? One, it's a sore point for me, but part of the solution, people don't like this, is for, number one, social media to step up much more, and get into the business of understanding who's advertising, vetting accounts. This gets very unpleasant because, you know, you start getting into, wait a minute, are you talking about messing with our free speech? No, I'm talking about countering an adversary who's trying to hurt us. The other thing that, again, people don't understand is that the everyday relationship and engagement between law enforcement and the social media platforms would actually like curl the hair of people like Jim Jordan and Matt Getz. They would have heart attacks, because what happens every day to keep kids safe, keep America safe, is that there's, you know, they have FBI agents on speed dial at Google and Twitter and Facebook. I mean, they see crimes and terror plots every goddamn day, and child abuse every day. And so if some of our legislators don't think that, that those platforms are talking with FBI every day, then they should wake up. So that part of that solution is to enhance that. And again, in our society, that would get people really exercised about, wait a minute, I don't like the government in my social media. Well, okay, you need to educate yourself. So we need a greater step up from social media platforms. We need even more engagement between the law enforcement in a very controlled way, by the way. It has to be strictly controlled. Evidence of a crime, FBI not telling you to take something down, but rather giving you a heads up. All of that has to get better, and people have to understand we're going to get hurt. And it's some of our very own cherished democratic principles, which I took an oath to preserve and protect in our Constitution. Free speech, freedom of assembly, that I'm all about that. I'm all about it. But it sometimes prevents us. We get scared out of our minds. Do you know, a lot of when the story is all finally told about January 6th and why the FBI looked like they were idiots, because there were memos and there was intelligence that many of you saw in the private sector. When the story's told, it's the goddamn lawyers at FBI headquarters and at DOJ who went, oh, wait a minute, I don't know. Are we monitoring free speech? Okay, well, look what happened on January 6th. So we've got to stop. Our own best character traits are actually causing people to fear taking action. It's a long discussion.
Oh,
And Shovel Girl, you got the.
oh,
Oh, go
thank
ahead,
you
Jen.
so much. Yeah, I was going to say that that our free speech has been exploited, right? The best in us.
I think
Yeah,
so. I know even that's going to get
yeah.
misquoted, by the way. But
Of course.
yeah.
But Ivan Agians, who ran the Aktivnie Merpriatia department, otherwise known as Active Measures, literally was quoted. His most famous quote is, "If they didn't have freedom of press, we would have invented for them."
Very, yeah.
So they knew
Yeah.
back when they invented that department in the 50s, that like this freedom of press thing, if you have a totalitarian government, it's easy to figure out the frequency. It's anything that isn't the state frequency.
Yeah.
But here, it's every frequency.
And
Yeah.
and the
Yeah. And my message is this: look, real simple. We can protect civil liberties while we protect our security. They're not mutually exclusive, and I think a lot of lawmakers think you can't do both at the same time.
I 100% agree. And the division, I think, is really what's made us so vulnerable. Our national security is at stake because of the division. Our unity used to be something that kept us strong. Thank you. And I just wanted to say thank you to Chris and Justin and all of the brilliant people in this room. And of course, you, Mr. Figliuzzi, I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. Last two comments and then let's wrap. Comments only.
Jane.
Jane and Shovel.
Sorry. Well, thank you guys. Absolutely. Everybody. And thank you for coming. Yeah, I actually agree with what you just said. And I wonder if the notion of free speech has gotten to the point where free speech, no holes barred, is something that is not only dividing us, but endangering us, not just from person to person, but as a nation. And I realize this is a huge conversation that
It is.
Yeah, but just quick take on that.
Oh gosh. So I, again, took an oath to preserve and protect the Constitution, and
which president was that you gave your oath to?
I didn't get. Good question. Good question. Not one president did I pledge loyalty to. Thank you. Yeah, Constitution. Yeah, we can do both civil liberties and security at the same time. I understand that this concept of hate speech, for example, gets into a quagmire very quickly because of who's defining it and how we define it. And I'm an advocate of free speech until someone is about to get hurt. And I think that's where the wiggle room is that we need to work on, which is instead of in the old days in the bureau, well, it's still going on. Very simple bank robbery example. You'd go to a prosecutor. You go, look, I got a source telling me, this bank's gonna get robbed. Here's who's it's gonna happen tomorrow. Blah blah blah. Prosecutor would tell you, well, I really want a strong case. Can you please wait till the guy walks into the bank with the gun? And we're like, okay, somebody's gonna get hurt, but okay. And so, we got to, that mentality has to back up a little bit. What if he's on his way to the bank with the gun? What if he's cased the bank 3 times under surveillance? That we've got it with the domestic terror problem. We've got to get more of that wiggle room, which is why I'm such a strong advocate for the domestic terror law, because suddenly you'll see prosecutors go, oh, well, sure. Okay. If he gets on the plane and he's going to go blow something up, you don't have to wait for him to plant the bomb. Right. That we need more of that. And so that's all I'm saying is not policing speech, but rather being more flexible and proactive. So we can do and prevent what they call left of boom before the bomb goes off.
Solid. Shovel, last comment.
Okay. It was really fun listening to you while I was trick-or-treating with my kids. That was the horror story I needed. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you so much for being with us. Yeah, you just hit on the Disinformation Governance Board. I've talked with members in this space before about it, how short-lived. I mean, it was really only around for like a month and a half. I think it was Nina Janowitz.
Right.
Yeah. And it just got piled on. But
Yeah.
What was suspicious to me was it got piled on by a lot of the people you would find awfully suspicious themselves.
That's right.
However, today I was listening to Fresh Air and David Kirkpatrick was getting interviewed, and he wrote a story for the New Yorker about foreign influence on our elections. And he
I didn't realize there's also a foreign malign influence center that is active
Yes.
right now. And
Yep.
I was just wondering, and I mean, we can save it for another time, but I just wanted to get on everybody's radar. And I'm hoping that they're doing a good job. Like, I'm looking for
Hmm.
any kind
Hmm.
of safeguards here, because
Yes.
it's.
Yeah, there's some good news there. Foreign malign influence, absolutely across agencies, kind of a fusion center concept. FBI is involved in that. I like the good news. I like the cross agency multidisciplinary approach to some of these things. I also wonder, just wondering out loud, whether we could take that short-lived, month-long government disinformation unit and move it out of the government and put it in the platforms, because um, many of places like Facebook are laying off their content moderators. I mean, they just are, and they're gun shy. I mean, I'm almost not blaming Facebook at this point. They've been burned in elections and accused of things. And, you were helping this. You took that one down. Why didn't you take this down? What? So they're like, you know what? Screw it. And we're laying everybody off. And, they try to throw up a smoke screen to say they're doing something, like just a day ago or something, where within a week
Right.
of the election, they stopped. You can't pay for boosting an ad, you can't advertise politically now. Oh, whoop-de-doo. So how many people really do paid boosting of political? I mean, really, that's your contribution to the security of the election is, yeah, a week out we're going to stop boosting, allowing politically boosted ads. Come on.
Well, back some time ago, when the whole ISIS, when we were shifting from like ISIS propaganda into disinformation as being the two things that we're having to deal with, I frequently would say in interviews, it's not in their business model. They woke up and wanted to do, task A,
Yep.
and either for popularity or for money. And all of a
Engagement.
sudden, there's this other thing that happened that was not in the business model. I've run a business for 25 years in the web, and I didn't wake up and decide, oh, I have to do this other thing too. Wait, this other thing? Yeah. What? But it is part of the reality.
Yes.
Like spam is a part of, or if you run a web company, spam's okay, it's spam, but not having to monitor Shahada flags and figure out what a groiper is and figure out how we're going to keep this Q thing out of our systems and
That's right.
whatever is the next variation of it. Yeah.
That's right.
So
Yeah,
it's just not, it's
there's a disincentive to doing this right, and they just care about engagement. But hey, listen, I gotta run, but
precisely.
I am grateful to have experienced my first space with Chris and all of you. Thank you, particularly on Halloween night, where I know many of you have had commitments. And if you want more of stuff like this, you can follow me on X until I can't take it anymore, and
and his
on
website. Yeah, he's got a website, Frank Figliuzzi, and actually the article for his last article for the column on Steve Bannon is up in the Nest right now.
Yeah, you can
And
go on the
yeah,
website that Chris just mentioned, frankfigliuzzi.com, and sign up. You'll see most of my TV appearances, my public appearances, my columns I write regularly for MSNBC Daily, and old podcasts and all of that good stuff, documentaries. You can also sign up for free for regular alerts on what I'm up to. I'm also on Threads. I'm also on Instagram, where I try to have a little more fun. But thank you.
Thank you, my man. Hey, take care of yourself.
Yep. Take care,
Go
everybody.
enjoy some good Halloween.
Thank you.
Bye, Batman.
Bye.
So to everyone else, I appreciate you being here. We're definitely, we've got a handful of days left, right? I've got a few more guests that I haven't told you about. One of them actually was messaging during this. Dakota Adams is working on his schedule. As I said before, he's running for office. Young man's going to do something good. Keir Giles is working on his schedule, so he's going to show up, and we're going to talk about not just about Russian influence on America, but what's Europe going to do? What's the situation in Europe going to look like, regardless of what happens with Trump? Have they learned any lessons? So I think that's one of the things we'll talk about. And again, we have a few more guest options. So, Justin, how you doing over there?
I'm doing fantastic. I mean, that was so good. People were thanking me for just sitting here. So I'm doing great.
That's how it is. Дуже дякую. So you know how we do this, right?
Yep.
Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.
І пиздець Російської Федерації.
NatSecMedia is a non-commercial news and information resource supported by listeners and viewers like you. Subscribe to our channels today, and we thank you for subscribing to our Patreon as a means of supporting independent journalism. Thank you.